following discussion is not necessarily the views of all involved. The goal is to start open and honest discussion in the Christian worldview. Like all things, weigh what you hear with what you know and join us in our pursuit for the truth. Enjoy the podcast.
The bag of foreskins is the main point, right?
What kind of goofy henchmen are these that they carried to bed to Saul and didn't notice it wasn't a real person? I'm going to trick him. And then David's like, I'm not even that cool. And he goes, yeah, you are. You converted my family or else.
All right. Welcome, everyone, to the Second Rate Saints podcast. I'm one of your hosts here, Caleb. To my left is...
I'm Josh. To my left is...
I'm Joel. And to my left...
It's me, Caleb. We are missing Colton and Stuart, sadly. So it's just the three of us.
Big sad.
Just hanging around. Joel, do we do things on the internet?
Quite frequently. Yeah, no, I've had a lot of fun putting stuff online lately. We just got past our 50th episode a couple episodes ago, and it feels a little bit like a milestone, like we're on the other side of it. So be sure to invite friends to start listening to the Second Rate Saints podcast, because honestly, we've got a backlog of topics. Do you just yawn, Josh? Okay, apparently Josh is already bored. Never mind. Forget about inviting your friends. No.
Straight into the microphone.
I'm sorry. I thought I dodged it.
We'll edit that out. Anyways, the yawn, probably not this tangent. Anyways, we are a decent ways into the podcast. We've enjoyed it thus far. We have a quite a broad span of topics to backlog. So if there's a episode that you would suggest to a friend, I'd encourage you to do that today. Send out that episode and see if you can get some interest drummed up for the podcast, because we're doing another Thoughts in Real Time episode, not today, but soon, and we would love to have some great questions. If you'd like to connect with us, you can do so at secondratesaints.com. You can email at us at secondratesaints@gmail.com, and you can follow us on our Instagram and Twitter under the same names. We try to be as active as we can be, and we're very much responding to response. So whatever content you would like to see more of, then be sure to interact. We have our blog posts online and our book reviews. This is becoming a long ad section, I'm realizing. So let's move on with it.
Yeah, I think that's a testament to how much we've grown, like how much we're spreading out. Because originally it was just check out the blog.
Yeah.
And now we're doing 1,000 different things, which is awesome.
And we do have stuff like in the works. I'm very excited to see what Second Rate Saints looks like in a year from now. I know we don't talk about like the future of Second Rate Saints very much on the podcast, but I'm very excited for what it's going to look like.
Yeah. Episode 75.
I think I would put closer to 100, but yeah, 75 would be interesting.
To do like a look forward?
Oh, we could do the future. I mean, I feel like we would be looking back at episode 100.
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
I feel like episode 100 is a good spot to do that.
We'll do the best bits or something. I don't know. Little bits.
Joel,
Yeah.
now that you've told everyone about what we do online, do you read? What have you read?
Yeah, so I was looking for, and maybe this is probably something we haven't really covered on the podcast as much. I was looking for a biography of a man of God. I actually reached out to a friend of mine that I knew that was more of his bag, and I said, "Hey, I need something encouraging, and I need something kind of man of God, men of valor kind of stuff, you know." And what he got back to me with was a book called "The Heavenly Man" by Brother Yun, who was a pastor in the 70s and 80s. Came to Christ in mainland China.
Wow.
And I can't remember the name of the exact province, but I would probably butcher the pronunciation anyways. Even though I was listening to the audiobook, it was very interesting.
Is it an autobiography or a biography? Biography.
It's a biography. Wait, which one is
Autobiography would be written by himself. If it's
so
written,
that's hard to answer, because some of them are firsthand accounts from himself,
okay,
and some are like his wife comes in and writes about her perspective of him.
it would kind of be funny.
It would be an autobiography, probably.
To write an autobiography and then call it The Heavenly Man.
That is what he calls himself.
Yeah,
and that's based out of a story that happens. In the
Okay,
book.
that sounds kind of...
Yeah. Yeah, I'll explain the name of the Heavenly Man now in a second, but it still sticks. Like he's still in ministry now, which I was kind of expecting him to get back with like somebody who is like dead and gone, right? Because that's typically what we think of when we think of biographies or autobiographies. But this one takes place in the 70s and 80s. When he's first coming to Christ, and there's just some absolutely crazy things that happen. He doesn't start off with a Bible. He starts off just hearing about Christ, and he hears about God's word, and he hears it preached in a time when it's very much illegal to be preaching anything other than the doctrine of the Chinese government. It's crazy. And so he kind of comes up alongside that, and he has this really, I think it's an inspiring story. It's not something you can do. It shows the power of fasting, but it doesn't do much outside of that. Is he prays and fasts for God to give him his own Bible. Because at this point, he's heard of the Bible. He's never read a Bible. And he's been a Christian for about 2 years, right? And he's living with his parents who are illiterate. They never even learned to read or write. And he's just praying. And someone gets a vision, comes to his town, comes to his door, and God told him in a vision that he would also receive a Bible. It's a whole story. It's one of those things where it's going to be hard for me to describe because he does such an eloquent job of describing his story.
It's kind of cool.
But yeah, it's just this example of how God uses the things we would never imagine being even possible in the modern day in like as recent as the 70s and 80s, right? Like it's so cool to see how he prays for a Bible and then one shows up at his door in the hands of somebody he's never met before, but also received a vision at a time when to have a Bible would get you killed. And that's kind of the background for him because he became one of the main oppositions to the Three Self Church in China, which is the Chinese government's control over the charismatic movement. And that's part of the reason why he's called the Heavenly Man, is because he was part of many house churches, and he would travel to different areas. He tells one story of like he would run through the woods and through the trails to get where he's supposed to go. And while he was doing it, he would just recite scripture. And he says that one day he had an experience like Philip, where he just appeared in like a different town, like in a much shorter time than he ever should have been able to get there. And it's just story after story where he's like, oh yeah, no, that happens in scripture, but he's fine. Like he's telling these stories from a time before he had read those scriptures himself. Right. Because he was able to get like pages at a time.
Right.
So Brother Yun is a pretty inspiring story. You get into his kind of modern day Paul experience. I know I'm getting like very charismatic with this. Not a lot of people would talk about a modern day Paul, but he has an experience of going to prison for Christ and for preaching. And he's there, and he even says in his book, I don't know how it happened, but I fasted for over 40 days. And when he got to 40 days, he felt that Satan was tempting him, saying, hey, even Jesus only did 40 days. You can eat now. And he goes, no, can't do it. There would be no reason to go this far and not go further. And he's just like in prison fasting. And he's sitting in prison, and he gets a message from his family from the outside. And he says, I'm totally fine. When I'm not supposed to be here, God will let me out. And so he's praying there one day, and the door slightly opens, and he gets up and he shuts it. And he goes, okay, it'll open again if I'm really supposed to leave. Then it opens again. And he gets up and he walks out. And
Just like Paul.
they're just like Paul.
They're just like Peter.
Yeah, like Peter, sorry. Yeah, some crazy stuff. The reason he's called the Heavenly Man is because he was being questioned by the police, and they asked him where he was from. And what they would do when they were caught is they would yell as loud as they could, even if they were only answering the questions, because they would want the rest of the people in the town to hear that they were being questioned. Right? Just as a kind of warning. And his whole thing was that he heard his congregation heard him saying, I am not of this world, I am of heaven, right? Like I am a heavenly man, right? Like that is where my destination is, and that's where my home is.
Citizen of heaven.
Yeah, so he says, if you send me back to my home, I will only be in heaven, right? Like, and it's like very like, yeah, let's fight him kind of thing, right? So he's a cool rebel. It's cool that he's still alive, like traveling around teaching. I
That's
think he still uses a translator. He has this one awesome story of when he goes to Norway, and he shows up there and he finds the grave of the woman who brought the gospel to his town, and had saved his entire family. And he goes to their grave and realizes that it's rotten and that it's starting to crumble, and there's no flowers or anything around it.
Yeah.
And he walks up to the local church. He goes, "Hey, why isn't this woman being honored?" It's like, "Oh, sorry, she doesn't have any family near us or anything." He goes, "Either you honor this woman, or in 2 years, I will send a group of Chinese men who have learned stonework in prison for the gospel, and they will fix this lot of land." And then he leaves. So he just threatens the church and then comes back 2 years later and he says, "There was a beautiful gate around her cemetery." Yeah.
What a weird Christian threat too.
Yeah.
I'll do it myself.
Well, I like his guilt of like, either you do it or those who have suffered for the gospel and will continue to suffer with the gospel will do the job you've neglected to do. Mm-hmm. And it's like, oh, yeah, fair enough. Hopefully that's not too incoherent ramblings. It's hard to go through every one of his stories because they are just rapid fire, like, oh, and this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened.
So who would you recommend that book for and why?
I would say for missional work, it's a big deal. For those who kind of want to see what the gospel being spread in other cultures looks like, that's pretty good. But also those who desire to live a life led by the Spirit in a very practical sense. Not just somebody who like talks the talk, but somebody who's like actually going through what it means to suffer like Christ. Honestly, I'd recommend it for myself. Somebody who I was, I'm starting my first little bit in ministry, and I wanted somebody who's like, I need a man of God's biography to look up to, kind of a thing, or autobiography to look up to. I want a, not quite a mentor. What would the word be?
Role model?
I don't know if it's a role model either. An example of a man of God. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
And there's plenty of stuff. I'm not just saying man of God in a generic sense. It could be woman of God, whatever. His wife is actually pretty awesome in that book as well. She writes a couple of sections. But, yeah.
That's awesome. Okay.
So that's The Heavenly Man by Brother Yoon. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Nice.
Yeah. Like I said, not something we typically cover, but I definitely enjoyed it.
It'd be cool to go over stuff like that. I know at some point I'm going to read a biography on Bonhoeffer, and I'm 100% going to talk about that here.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
That's on my reading list. Josh.
Yes.
We're continuing with Samuel.
Yes, we are.
Do you want to do previously on Samuel?
Previously on Samuel.
Very good.
So we talked about last week, we read chapter 17 at every verse. Because chapter 17 is in the book of 1 Samuel, the best chapter.
Really?
Because it's David v. Goliath. Like the pay-per-view event of the Old Testament. Like the other one, like
the prophets of Baal versus Elijah.
Yeah,
That'd
but
be the other
that's
one.
a but
He does
Samson
kill
and
them
the
all.
donkey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Samson and the donkey.
Donkey's jawbone.
He does kill all the prophets afterwards.
Yes. No, and that's remarkable, but that's God v. Baal.
I would argue this is also God v. Dagon.
Yes, but it's through the lens of God is empowering David to fight God's enemies.
Yeah.
Whereas in Elijah's clearly saying this is his fight. This is
See,
yeah.
I understand. It is awesome.
Yes. Also the one-liners. Anyway, so what
It's like Spider-Man.
chapter 17 is beautiful because it is the scene where we get to see what type of man David is going to be in these passages coming up, and what kind of man Saul is going to be from this point on. Because up until now, we got Saul was great. He was the king the people chose and that God empowered. The Spirit would rush upon him. He would prophesy and fight God's enemies. And then he started to make some mistakes, sin a bit, and now you see him hiding in his tent.
Yeah. Well, he fails to execute the word of God with the Amalekites,
Yes.
and then now he's just a coward.
And now he's just hiding in his tent. And this cheese delivering shepherd,
Skip the dishes.
Skip the Dishes, Bible edition, shows up and he's like, hey, why are we letting this guy just badmouth God?
Uncircumcised Gentile.
Yeah. Why are we letting this loser say bad things about God and his people? We should, why isn't he dead yet? And so he goes up to Saul and he's like, I'll fight him. I'll put him down. Right. And Saul is like, what can you do? And David, young man David, is like, I fought lions and tigers and bears, and God has given them all over to me to defend my father's sheep.
Mm-hmm.
To defend his honor and to defend his people, he will do the same.
Yeah.
And he goes to the battle, rushes upon Goliath, kills him quick and fast, decapitates him, and sends the Philistines running.
Yeah. Well, it shows how like Davidic imagery is also Good Shepherd imagery.
Yes.
Which is really cool.
Yeah. In the scene where he is a warrior fighting God's enemies, he's also depicted as a shepherd.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting note. Good eye.
Yeah.
And so now we get to the scene where David is working in Saul's service with his family. And sorry, that was previously. Oh, yes. So we also talked about how chapter 16, the ending part, when he starts helping Saul with his harmful spirit, is probably after the fight with Goliath. There's a continuity interestingness there. Mm-hmm. And so now after the fight with Goliath, David is working with Saul, and he is in his house. When the harmful spirit comes upon him, he plays his harp and soothes him. And so he defended Israel, which was supposed to be the king's job, and is now imbued with the Holy Spirit, helping the king with his problems.
Yeah.
And that leads us to where we are.
All right. So
chapter 18.
Picking up 18, verse 1. As soon as he had finished speaking to Saul, the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. And Saul took him that day and would not let him return to his father's house. Then Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as his own soul. And David stripped himself of the robe that was on him and gave it to David, and his armor, and even his sword, and his bow, and his belt. We're going to stop it there. So?
I mean, it seems like this is going to be the pattern is that he continues to take Saul's supporters and bring them into his own house, right? Like we're seeing that with Jonathan. We'll see it with Michael a little later on. And we even see it with Samuel being his court prophet.
Yeah.
I think that's I think that's what's beginning here.
Well, it also is that is a standard like covenant between two houses, which is interesting.
Yeah, there's a political significance to the love that's mentioned here.
Yeah.
Which is mentioned by Bill T. Arnold in the NIV application commentary, which if you're looking for a commentary to preach from is actually really good. They have a lot of good stuff.
V. Phillips Long also makes it note of that in the Tyndale series.
I love the Tyndale commentary series.
They're so approachable.
They're pretty good.
So just to say the thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because there is a surprising amount of people that go in this direction.
I thought
with
we
this
agreed
passage.
we weren't going to talk about this.
Oh, I thought we
whatever.
weren't just going to talk about it like in depth for like, an hour and a half.
So
we just say it's not true, right?
Everyone knows what we're discussing.
let's talk about it before we say it's not true.
Joel.
Yeah.
Is Jonathan gay?
See, if you look at kind of warriors that fight together in older stories, like taking Gilgamesh and Enkidu or something like that and putting them together, there's been a lot of speculation that there is a sexual element to that friendship. And that's, to me, that's speculation, right? Like if you take the the political aspects of Jonathan being, loyal to David, and even giving over like his prince status to David. I feel like what's being communicated is closer to political than to any kind of romantic.
Well, it's,
I think it's also a little bit of the people that do that look at Greek warrior bromance stuff, and then they just superimpose that into the ancient Near East wildly and liberally, and it's not fair to the Greek culture or the ancient Near Eastern culture, which in of itself is multifaceted.
And the idea of homosexuality being against Levitical law is laid down long before this would be here.
Yeah.
Right? Which means the scholars and the scribes that would be not only editing, but originating this text, writing this down for the first time, would be familiar that they're portraying the king of Israel, the greatest king of Israel, in a light that would be contrary to Levitical law.
Yeah.
And I don't see that being a possibility.
And even from like a hermeneutics perspective on like the passage, like an exegesis perspective, the entire thing is shrouded in they're making a covenant. It's transfer of the princely image of that's the whole giving him his like clothing and his robes and his weapons.
Yeah.
Which would have been royal and would have been royal implements and stuff like that. And then the all of the languages of that covenant, and you're taking that one phrase, that one word, the love between the two of them, and you're making that the whole thing.
Yeah.
Rather than everything that's in the passage.
Yeah.
You're letting one word determine your view of the passage rather than letting the passage
Inform
how
you
your view
read
of the
the
word.
words. Yeah.
And so
I think there's V Long comments. The closest verbal analog to this statement in the Bible is perhaps the description of Jacob's attachment to his son Benjamin, which is in Genesis 44:30, which is for his life is bound up with the boy's life.
yes.
And that's Judah telling, why can't I think of his name? Joseph.
Yeah.
Like, hey, I can't, like, no, our father's emotional connection to Benjamin.
Is so strong that if Benjamin dies, he'll die.
Yeah. And so that appears to be perhaps akin to what's going on here.
Yeah. If you just look at the use of the word.
It is different words. It is different
okay.
words.
Yeah.
But it may be a more helpful analogy of what's going on with the whole, like, their souls are united, right? And like that may be closer to what's going on there, especially with that soul united.
Yeah, I just lean towards Saul being stripped away of those closest to him. I think it's...
There's also, he gets into, same commenter, he gets into an interesting thing of how it's like Jonathan plays a big role in Saul's conquests previously, but he's not mentioned with Goliath. Why? Why is Jonathan not there? Why is Jonathan the one who's like, hey, the Lord's going to give us like the battle. What's the problem? Trust God. Yeah. We got this. Right? Why is he not there? And so Long, this is his argument, I think it's a little far-fetched, but it's interesting enough that I'm going to mention it, is that Jonathan knows that the kingdom of Israel has been taken away from his father, and he knows that someone else is going to rise up and take it. And so he doesn't come to, he's waiting to see who God's going to send to take on Goliath.
Because he knows the kingdom, the kingship being taken away from him is not just him, but his family line.
Yep.
And so if Jonathan shows up and does it, then he knows he's not the one that shows up and does it.
And there's also a distinction, and we'll get into it a little bit actually coming in the next few verses as well. Why does Jonathan give him the princely robe, the armor, the this? It's because he knows. He knows he's not going to inherit the throne.
Yep.
And yet he's a faithful servant of God. And that's kind of already been depicted a little bit with Eli, where it's like God's judgment's poured out and he's like, okay, I'm accepting God's judgment.
Yeah.
Yep.
And yet, in this case, the judgment was caused by Saul, not
Yeah.
Jonathan. And Jonathan's just
But it's not going to turn out bad for Jonathan. It's not going to turn out bad for Jonathan, so to speak. The judgment is on Saul, and it just means that he won't be king.
Yeah.
But it's not like Jonathan's been promised to be killed, or
although he is.
although he does die. He's not promised, you and your sons have taken away my glory.
Yeah.
It's just, hey, you did some bad.
Yeah, yeah.
And the sins of the father passed down to the son.
Carry on.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Starting back up in verse 5. And David went out and was successful wherever Saul sent him, so that Saul set him over the men of war. And this was good in the sight of all the people, and also in the sight of Saul's servants. As they were coming home, when David returned from striking down the Philistines, the woman came out of the cities of Israel, singing and dancing, to meet King Saul with tambourines and songs of joy, and with musical instruments. And the women came to sing to one another as they celebrated. Saul has struck down his thousands, and David his tens of thousands. And Saul was very angry, and this saying displeased him. He said, "They have ascribed to David tens of thousands, and to me they have ascribed thousands. And what can he do but have the kingdom?" And Saul eyed David from that day on.
Dun, dun, dun.
Suspicion is raised.
Yeah, but he already knows that his kingdom's not his. He already knows that he's going to lose the kingdom.
I like that they still aren't portraying Saul in a negative light. They're like, oh, he's slain thousands, and David has slain tens of thousands.
Mhm.
It's like,
It's not an insult.
it's not exactly an insult, but it is.
Well, and at least what I read elsewhere was it probably shouldn't be. Is it time for you to take your pills?
I don't guess so. It's not turning off. Okay, there you go.
Is it's probably not meant as an insult, even, because of how Hebrew poetry works and the prose and all that. But the part of the issue is it does just elevate David to the same or higher than Saul, no matter what it does, even if it's not an insult to Saul. I do find it interesting, just like funny brain moment for me, where it's just like the women are singing in his name. Now, could he take next? The whole kingdom?
Yeah. First he takes the women, then the kingdom. Oh man,
It does kind of seem that way.
Yeah.
it is that way. I mean, the amount of wives of these kings during the United Monarchy, terrible.
The other thing is interesting is because like David is now kind of acting as Saul's champion.
Yeah.
And so it's almost like of course he should be defeating more people. Like in the same way that Goliath probably killed a lot more people than the king of Philistia.
Dude, I would play a dungeon crawler as David just because of how much loot he's getting in this whole passage.
Oh, yeah.
You know, he just got like the armor of Goliath, then he's getting the priestly robes, and now he's getting multiple wives.
The priestly robes?
And-
The princely
Robes.
sorry.
And 10,000 men's belongings.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Which also it's showing you that the Saul's character is getting worse.
Yeah.
That he's not just making moral failings when he's disobeying God or because he thought he was doing good or I'll do this, maybe that'll please God. Stuff like that. It's now actively he's cynical and resentful of a man who's doing well. And he's not the spotlight. And that's not good.
Yeah. I think there's also, he's not accepting the fate that God has dealt, like with Eli. Right? No, or like his son.
Mm-hmm. He's fighting it.
Really? You think that Saul is more active in his rebellion against this judgment that God has placed
I
upon
think
him.
so. The fact that he's like, what is he going to take next? The kingdom? It's not yours. The
Yeah.
kingdom has been told that it has been torn from you.
Yeah, that's fair. He is equating the kingdom with his reputation there.
Mm-hmm. And that as if it's his, but it's already been but he's already been informed by Samuel that it will be given to another.
Whereas Eli said, and you could sense it, where he's like, the Lord has told you to say something to me.
And
Say
he
it.
knows.
Yeah.
And he knows. And when he
Say
said
it.
it's like, okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
So be it. Yep.
Starting back up in verse 10. The next day, a harmful spirit from God rushed upon Saul, and he raved within his house while David was playing the lyre. As he... Joel's over there raving, just dancing in the chair. As he did day by day, Saul had his spear in hand, and Saul hurled the spear, for he thought, I will pin David to the wall. But David evaded him twice. Saul was afraid of David because the Lord was with him, but he had departed from Saul. So Saul removed him from his presence and made him a commander of thousands. And he went out and came in before the people. And David had success in all his undertakings, for the Lord was with him. And when David saw that he had great success, he stood in fearful awe of him. But all of Israel and Judah loved David, for he went out and came in before them.
Okay. I have a few thoughts.
That's
good.
good.
What's interesting is it says that the harmful spirit rushed upon Saul, which is the same way as the Holy Spirit rushed upon Saul.
I have a real hard time with that.
I know.
Yeah, bothers me.
The other thing is that when he attacks him, right? Because where is it? We mentioned earlier in the previous passage where when the Holy Spirit the Spirit was with David, and that he was still around Saul, even though he had left Saul, the Spirit was still with David, and David's with Saul the whole time, right? Is now that he's fallen into his resentment so much that the presence of the Spirit is now something he hates.
Yeah.
And he wants to get David away from him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, some translations have evil, some have harmful.
This is going to sound progressive. Every now and then I feel like I say something like theologically progressive on the podcast, and people, I worry that people will think that I'm like, he's a progressive theologian, and I'm not. I just like having consistent hermeneutics.
Okay.
And those things aren't correlated. It's just, let's start off with something that everyone agrees on.
Okay.
What was hidden in the old is revealed in the new.
Yes.
Right? Okay. A progressive revelation. We do believe that more of God's character and his plan and his purpose for humanity is revealed in the New Testament.
Mm-hmm.
That's why when you and I can read the Old Testament here, when it says the Spirit of God, we can say, the Holy Spirit.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I think we can say that.
Mm-hmm.
So I also think that the theological conception and beliefs of the Old Testament authors and editors are prior than some later developments. Thus, they have no problem then recording like the evil spirit that God sent, right? Whereas later authors of a more theologically developed articulation would change it slightly, right? And you see that even reflected in certain moments between First Kings and Chronicles. We won't get into that, but that does happen. So I think that's
yeah. There is one other good example, actually, in Samuel, when David has to take the census, and it says the Spirit of God. God entices him to make a census.
Yeah. How do you harmonize that with James?
No. And then in 2 Chronicles, it says the Satan enticed David to make the census.
And you see theological convictions shift with God moving through, I would argue, the theological conception, along with their scripture, the tradition of Israel coming about throughout the ages.
Yeah. And what you see,
You also see it to their belief in the afterlife.
yes. But what you see, and then you see it heavily laid in the prophets later on in the Bible, is this idea that God continuously asserts himself that he is Lord over the good and the evil.
Mm-hmm.
And so, whereas it's alluded to in these stories, like, for example, God giving an evil spirit to Saul as judgment for his sin, or the sending of God's enemies to God's people as an act of judgment in exile, that God, being God over good and evil, is the Lord over it. The evil is not an opponent that is of
in
dualistic power.
Isaiah 45, I think it's 7. For I form light and create darkness. I bring prosperity and I create disaster. For I, the Lord, do these things.
Or Amos when he opposes Israel and he brings the destruction on them, he says, I will look upon you,
not for good, but
for good, but for evil.
Yeah, and you even have in Habakkuk where the Lord follows to judgment, pestilence follows. And I mean, you even have that whole thing set up in Revelation. It's not just the Old Testament. This is the God of the Bible.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, he brings the Ark of the Covenant to 5 other Philistine cities previous to this and decimates them.
We went on a tangent.
Yeah,
there.
I suppose I like your point of what is in the Old Testament is revealed in the New. How did you phrase that?
What is hidden in the Old?
Oh, hidden in the Old is revealed in the New.
That's half the quote. There's a second half. What is hidden in the Old is revealed in the New, and what is either like what is presented in the New is laid in the Old. It's a 2-sentence saying.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've heard it, but I feel like I did, probably in a G.K. Beale. He does a New Testament biblical theology that's really good.
He has an entire biblical theology of mystery that I would love to read.
Okay.
But anyway, we'll
get off of that a little bit. So that does answer my question so far as what does an evil spirit from God mean? And why in the world? Because in my mind, it's more of a demonic oppression thing.
Yeah. That's
what I had previously thought. But if it is just the judgment of God fighting against the now hardened heart of Saul, I think I'm a little more comfortable with that. Yeah. And it actually explains the human aspect a lot more than just making this some kind of spiritual influence.
Yeah, or even psychological.
Yeah, okay.
As it was taken, as we kind of batted around the idea previously a couple episodes ago.
Yeah.
Do you guys find it interesting how it's not a euphemism because it's not, but it's just for when he goes out, has massive success and then comes back in.
Yeah.
And it's just like the terminology is he goes out, massive success. He's a beautiful military commander. And then he comes back in and it's this like feeling of every time he goes out, has success, he grows popular. His popularity grows, his reputation grows, and it's just like Saul can't solve the problem.
Well, no, and what's interesting is every time he attempts to kill him, because it says he throws the spear at him, but David evaded him twice.
Yeah,
is that every time he attempts to kill him, he's just pushing David into success.
Mm-hmm.
So his own fear and hatred for what's happening is causing he's increasing David's success by constantly driving him away from him.
Could you imagine the tension in the royal, like in the royal court?
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, why is there holes in the drywall? Oh, Saul just threw a spear at David.
Why is there drywall?
Oh, that's so because when they go out, they both get praised for doing great. Mm-hmm. Right. So the people outside of the castle think everything's fine. Mm-hmm. These two guys are doing great things. They're defending the kingdom. They're working together. Saul's sending David on all these military expeditions while he stays home. Mm-hmm. You know, they're
so he can govern us. Well, he's got a champion who's this awesome warrior.
Meanwhile, behind the door, David's dodging. spears, and that's probably why it's like that's why David's so good at fighting right now, is because no matter where he goes,
He's always fighting.
he's always fighting. Yeah, continue.
So, in chapter 17, one of the rewards for killing Goliath was marriage of Saul's daughter. So, picking up in verse 17, then Saul said to David, "Here is my elder daughter, Merab. I will give her to you for a wife. Only be valiant for me and fight the Lord's battles." For Saul thought, "Let not my hand be against him, but let the hand of the Philistines be against him." And David said to Saul, "Who am I, and who are my relatives? My father's clan in Israel. My father's clan in Israel, that I should be son-in-law of the king." But at that time, when Merab, Saul's daughter, should have been given to David, she was given to Adriel, the Metholite, for a wife. Metholite. Pills again,
I
lots.
don't know, man.
Maholathite.
Maholathite. Thank you.
You're welcome.
We'll we'll stop there.
Yeah.
So there's a couple weird things. He's like, "Hey, let my hand not be against him," but he's throwing spears at him anyway.
Well, I think it's now he's like, that's not working.
Yeah.
Let's send him to the enemy.
Which is also what he had just been doing.
Then the solution that Saul is proposing is, I give my daughter to you, making you part of my family.
which is what he does.
No, I would say that there's something else going on here. Because he gives this Merab, his daughter. He tries to give him to David. David says no. But then the next verse, and we'll go into this in a second, says, now Saul's daughter Michal was in love with David. There was a desire. It wasn't that David was being brought into Saul's house. It was that Saul's house is jumping ship and going with David. Like, I think there's very much the direction of power is intentional here. At least in my mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think I'm reading that onto the text. I think it's pretty explicit that all of these things are like, and then everyone loved David. It's like,
And Saul was mad.
yeah, and Saul can go suck an egg, I guess. Better call Saul, I guess. I should have saved that for a better time to say that.
It's also interesting that we have another story where, now this is common in the patriarchs when we were doing the patriarch episodes.
Oh no, I just saw a couple verses ahead.
Where, one second, where the eldest daughter is offered, and the figure that is being empowered by God says, "Nah, I don't want the oldest."
Yeah.
Which is the same as Jacob, where he's like, "No, I don't want the oldest," which is a huge insult.
Yeah.
And a huge problem.
Well, especially if the eldest daughter is not married first.
Yes, that's yeah.
What?
And so, but now that she's married off at the end of that verse, it's like, oh, okay, now it's okay.
Which is,
Yeah.
It's a cultural thing that we just...
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't realize the level of disrespect that David would have been positioning towards Saul in his rejection of marriage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Although I don't know if disrespect is the right one either.
But then he also, it's shrouded in piety and humbleness.
Yes.
Right? Like, it's like, shrouded might not even be the right word, because I think it might be legitimate.
Well, yeah, because he's just like, no, I don't deserve it.
Yeah. So what, I killed the Goliath and you promised your daughter. My family's like, common people in Israel. What?
Now, here's the thing. David knows he's going to be king.
Mm-hmm.
So is he covering his bases?
Who knows?
Like, is he like, no. Or is he, or is he onto it? Is he saying like, no, I can't be a part of his family
Because I'm supposed to be another.
because I'm supposed to be the other. It's not the continuation of.
But I like where Joel is going with that.
Yeah.
This next one's going to be a bit of a read, so we'll just jump right into it. Okay.
Absolutely.
Picking back up at 20. Now Saul's daughter Michal loved David, and they told Saul, and the thing pleased him. For Saul thought, "Let me give her to him, that she may be a snare for him, and that the hand of the Philistines may be against him." Therefore Saul said to David a second time, "You shall now be my son-in-law." And Saul commanded his servants, "Speak to David in private, and say, Behold, the king has delight in you, and all his servants love you. Now then, become the king's son-in-law." And Saul's servant spoke these words in the ears of David. And David said, "Does it seem to you a little thing to become the king's son-in-law, since I am a poor man and have no reputation?" Sorry.
I didn't even do anything.
I couldn't. Anyway, 24. And the servants of Saul told him, "Thus and so do David speak." And Saul said, "Thus shall you say to David, the king describes no bride price except 100 foreskins from the Philistines, and he may be avenged by the king's enemies." So Saul thought to make David fall by the hand of the Philistines. And when his servants told David these words, it pleased David well to be the king's son-in-law before the time had expired. Before the time had expired, David arose and went along with his men and killed 200 of the Philistines. And David brought their foreskins, which were given in a full number to the king, that he might become the king's son-in-law. And Saul gave him his daughter Michal for a wife. But when Saul saw and knew that the Lord was with David, and that Michal, Saul's daughter, loved him, Saul was even more afraid of David. So Saul was David's enemy continually.
Okay, so here's the thing.
Worst job ever.
Who counted the foreskins?
That's what I'm saying, right?
We talked about this in class.
Yeah.
Yes.
The prof thought it was hilarious.
Oh, he loved it.
I don't think he had an answer, but there's not really an answer. It's just, well,
Okay.
yeah, that would suck.
Here's the thing. David had to count them.
Also, he's defiled now for a little bit.
Yes. Also, why do you think why the foreskin? This is such an awkward conversation. But why did Saul say, "Hey, that"? Why not like headhunters would go for scalps? There's other parts of it, like ears, whatever, that people in weird cultures go for.
Hands.
Do you think it's because like
Oh, here's the thing. You know how we mentioned it actually when we talked about the ark going on its rampage.
yes.
Armies would cut off a body part that is significant to that god, to their god.
Mm-hmm.
Circumcision is a sign of the covenant. Is there a more Jewish thing in that realm when it's just like, oh yeah, look at the big army they're all circumcised. I wonder who does that.
Yes.
Hmm?
Yeah, fair enough. It also, Saul doesn't say you have to kill him.
Yeah, it is interesting.
And then it says that David killed him, but which is fair because like you're not going to get a lot of volunteers.
Now, here's the thing. Do you think he actually like did the surgery, or do you
It's
think
him and his men.
Yeah, or do you think he got his men to do it?
Oh, he
Like he killed them all, and then
well, I think it's implied that he and his men would do it all, right?
yeah.
But like, also, I don't know. To me, I just can't get over the counting run, right? Because 121, 122, 120, 123, 124.
Yeah. No, I get that.
It's terrible.
Do you think? Because there's a parallel story here where Simon and Levi
Yes.
go and demand that all of the guys that want to marry their sister that they
Grape.
yes they demand that they have to get circumcised, and then they kill them all.
Yes. Because they had to walk like they're riding a horse.
Yes.
I think the mercy was killing them first. It doesn't say they're killing them first, is it?
I think it's implied.
Implied.
I think it's the logical conclusion. Imagine
Yeah.
being forced circumcised and then killed.
Well, no, because
would
that's what I
suck.
mean is like, do you think if you're forced to enter the covenant, are you entering the covenant?
What about infants? Anyway, moving on.
Yeah.
No, I
Yes.
just,
I don't know.
No, but I mean, like,
Maybe so.
is there a significance beyond just?
And those are the 200 Philistines that made it to heaven.
Yeah.
They were very
Yeah.
confused, but a little relieved.
Do you think God's like, you guys are lucky? Like,
Well, I mean, that would
You're lucky that-
only be if they were circumcised before they were killed.
Okay, so let's go back to a little bit earlier. This is when Saul's like, I'm gonna trick him.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then David's like, I'm not even that cool. And he goes, yeah, you are. You become part of my family or else. To me, there's just the amount of arrogance on one side for Saul is so high.
But here's the thing.
But then the story's opinion of David is so much higher.
Here's
so-
the thing. David says, I have no reputation.
Yeah.
Which is not true.
Yeah,
is
the
he being
chronology
humble?
is wild.
Is he being humble?
I think so. Because also the fact that, think about it this way.
Or is David being a little sneaky?
Imagine, well, it's probably a bit of both. But imagine, like, I have no reputation. And it's like, anyway, 200 foreskins. And be like, oh, yeah, I can do that. What?
Yeah. Or is he saying, no, it's not me, it's the Lord?
It's also requested 100 and then it's 200.
Yeah. Yeah.
Here's the thing. I
little
think David is
weird
saying
flex. I don't
all
know.
of this and then doing the crazy stuff with a little smile. It was like, hey guys, get a load of this. Do you want to guess what Saul's gonna do?
Saul's going to lose his mind when I do this.
Because I told him I have no reputation. I'm not known for anything like killing more people than you want.
Yep.
That might be it. It's
What's wild is he goes and works for the Philistines a little bit after this.
yeah. No.
That's something else.
No. What's crazy is like he's known for killing more people than Saul wants him to. Right?
Mhm.
He doesn't want him to kill as many
Well,
people as him.
he's just more successful.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, here.
But and then specifically, he says, I have no reputation, which is all based on his success. Right. And then, like in the passage where it's Saul kills his thousands, David kills his 10,000s, David is told by Saul to kill 100 men and kills more.
Yeah.
So did he choose to, or did 200 men just attack him
It
and
does
then he has
kinda-
to defend himself?
It sounds more like a raiding party to me, which means that they broke into a village, killed the men, mutilated their corpse, and then ran away. Can you imagine this from the Philistines' perspective? What?
Yeah, but it's is the
Boys'
200 intentional? Is the 200 intentional, or was it 200 men attacked him? Because if it's 200 men, then he intentionally attacked 200 men.
I think you're
Here's the
missing
thing.
up
Here's the
Saul.
thing. If he brought it back and he was like, I did this for self-defense, they'd be like, no, you didn't.
No, but that's what I
Nobody-
mean.
It sounds more like a raiding party. Like he went into Philistine
Yes.
lands, caught people that were just doing their stuff, and then mutilated their body.
Yes, but he intentionally did more than asked.
Right.
For what reason?
He's really good at raiding.
No, but why does he do more? Why does he do exactly double?
To
think
show
it's-
off, to flex.
Yes.
Because he's more successful. Because
But it's so backwards to his statement where he says, I have
Oh,
no
yeah.
reputation for doing
oh yeah,
double what you do. So he's lying and mocking to him.
yeah.
I guess so.
Think about it this way:
Is he egging Saul on?
Michael's happy to marry a man, and she's like, "Ah, what was your dowry? Bag of you know what?
Which is
Yeah.
funny because he already
Big ol'.
did something like this to get a wife.
Yeah.
Yeah, he
He was already promised the wife for killing.
Goliath.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, finishing up chapter 18. Then starting at 30. Then the commanders of the Philistines came out to battle, and as often as they came out, David had more success than all the servants of Saul, so that his name was highly esteemed.
Yeah.
David's just good at war, man. I do find it interesting that it goes, David raided the Philistines' lands and killed 200 of them and mutilated their corpse to get a wife. Anyway, so the Philistines came out and were like, what? And then they declared war.
Like you do.
Yeah.
That'd be pretty wild. It's like, you win some, you lose some. It's like, no, this is...
What is this guy?
Which is interesting because they know they're going to war with the nation that has David.
Mm-hmm. And Saul. Like, it's no
Yeah.
small thing that Goliath went, oh, you servants of Saul?
Well, and
Yeah.
what's crazy is like after he was a coward with David and Goliath, right? He's then rewarded for having gone out to battle. So did he get his courage back?
I think it's the when your army's doing good, you're a good commander.
Yeah, but that's what's interesting is he's not a coward anymore for that section after David. And David and Goliath, which is like, is if he got courage?
Maybe he's just the tall man in the room again.
Yeah. Anyways, shall I read the next section?
It
Yes,
also
please.
says, and his name became well known, which is just subverts the earlier thing.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah.
As if it wasn't already.
Yes.
Okay. Chapter 19. I'm going to read to verse 7. And Saul and Saul spoke to Jonathan his son and to all his servants, and they should kill David. But Jonathan, Saul's son, delighted much in David. And Jonathan told David, Saul, my father seeks to kill you. Therefore, be on your guard in the morning. Stay in a secret place and hide yourself. And I will go out and stand beside my father in the field where you are. And I will speak to my father about you. And if I learn anything, I will tell you. And Jonathan spoke well of David to Saul, his father, and said to him, let not the king sin against his servant David, because he has not sinned against you, and because his deeds have brought good to you. For he took his wife in his hand, and he struck down the Philistines, and the Lord worked in great salvation for all of Israel. You saw it and rejoiced. Why then will you sin against the innocent blood by killing David without cause? And Saul listened to the voice of Jonathan. Saul swore, as the Lord lives, he shall not be put to death. And Jonathan called David, and Jonathan reported to him all these things. Jonathan brought David to Saul, and he was in his presence as before.
Saul is inconsistent.
Mm-hmm.
Like most leaders towards the end of their reign, they begin to become desperate and self-contradictory, and it only further destabilizes the whole situation.
I think he's so broken with having been chosen by God, denied by God, having success, having failure, and he's been called out multiple times by the prophet for what seemed like rash attempts at piety, not thought through, and ended up being disobedience.
Yeah.
And now he's gotten so cynical and resentful and narcissistic. He's experiencing all three of the dark triad, emotions, which puts you in the worst of male behavior.
Yeah.
And
In a sense, that is a perversion of masculine leadership.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah, you're talking about the extremes of evil male violence.
Yeah.
The kind of stuff that puts you in prison.
Mm-hmm.
And he's deeply resentful of someone who is successful and chosen by God.
Yeah.
And he's cynical about the world, and he's lying constantly.
Well, and part of the thing is he lying in this moment? Like most people in those situations,
Mhm.
right? People who are actually, I think a book that I think we all have read, and I think we even talked on I think we did what have you read on it, is Notes from Underground.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The man from underground lies to himself always.
Yeah.
And he's very akin to this, where it's this
People hate me.
people hate me. I'm going to do better. I can't do better. I'm going to promise to do better. I can't fulfill my promises. Who am I? Anyway, screw you. Going all over the place.
Yeah.
And it's this unreliable, unstable.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so at least the way I read it, I actually think Saul's honest when he's talking here, but he is not in a position to even know himself.
No. And he's done this so many times now. Like even in the last chapter, his back and forth, kill, don't kill, send him to be killed, attempt to kill him, marry him off, try to get him in the family, kill him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's
Imagine Jonathan's position,
ugh.
where he's he knows his father's going to lose
Yeah.
the kingdom. He obviously sees David as Lord's anointed.
Yeah. But what's interesting, and I like this about Jonathan, is he's honoring his father.
Yeah.
He's not breaking that commandment. He's not cursing him,
Yeah.
which is
He pleads with him.
honorable.
Yeah.
Great guy. Unfortunate. And that leads us to our next section. And there was war again. And David went out and fought with the Philistines and struck them with a great blow so that they fled before him. Then a harmful spirit from the Lord came upon Saul as he sat in his house with his spear in his hand, and David was playing the lyre. And Saul sought to pin David to the wall with the spear, but he eluded Saul, so that he struck the spear into the wall, and David fled and escaped that night. So this is interesting. Saul just has his spear in his hands.
And it's often depicted as if they're the only ones in that room. Not likely.
No.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, it would probably be his court assembled, right?
Yeah.
Like that he would be maybe on his throne, but more likely on a couch or something similar.
Yeah, and it's people discussing politics and what's going on.
It's him still being king.
Yeah.
And even while he still is the king, he cannot stand those who are also being brought up.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to take a little bit of a side tangent here, but it's a mark of bad leadership. If somebody in leadership above you cannot stand to see others also in leadership, that's a red flag.
Yeah.
If you feel jealousy towards those that God is using, that's a red flag, right? So I think we should see ourselves both as David and as Saul here, right? That we aspire to be David, to be raising up through the ranks and still being of service to those in leadership, but at the same time, we're more likely to be Saul, where we're kind of trying to step on the heads of those who are also coming up alongside of us.
We see them as threats.
which is why one of the greatest skills as a leader is proper delegation of finding somebody that's better than you at a certain task and giving them that task.
Well, training your replacement is a model of mentorship.
Well,
Right.
I just mean like in the example of, let's say, a CEO, right? The whole point of the business as a structure is you need to, as the creator of the business, right? You come up with, and you're doing everything, right? You're doing sales, you're doing marketing, you're doing all this stuff. But your goal is to find somebody that's good at marketing,
Yeah.
better than you, that can replace you.
Yep.
And then you need to find somebody that's good at sales, that's better at sales than you are, and replace you. And you need to replace all the aspects that you do in the business, except for the delegation of tasks and like the headship part, and give that to other people and find them in ways and train them, or find people that are better than you and get them on board, because there are better people than you in the room, and you need those people to do that part. And then they need to find people that can do those tasks within that branch that they're over, that are better than them at it, and get them to do it. And building up and structuring.
Absolutely.
Right. And so and you see the same thing in churches, and you see the same thing in kings. The king needs smarter generals than he to counsel him. The king needs wiser men than he to counsel him.
Yeah.
And so,
Well, and I think, I don't know, to me, I get reminded of good fathers don't see their sons as threats. They want to propel them so that they are more financially stable than when they were their son's age. More mature, more put together, more competent, more emotionally aware, more theologically grounded. They are excited for their son to be further along. If as a parent, and I think it's true probably as both with both parents, but I think it's easy to see it within that father-son relationship. The success or to be outshined by your son is not something to be feared, because if your son does outshine you and you are trying to raise them up, right? Give them the best life that you can. That's what you want as a parent, right?
you're trying to give them all of the wisdom, all of the knowledge, all of the ways to live that you have gained, that you know are good because you've weeded out the bad, so to speak.
And so if Saul had taken the same approach that his son did,
Yeah.
recognizing that this is God's anointed leader. We would have a completely different Bible. We have no idea what that would be. Not in whole, but you know what I mean. This chapter, these chapters, be totally different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the imagery that I'm getting from it, and I know that that's not all of that's super comparative, but
Well, I think we would have seen something similar to Eli, where he was like he was being judged, and yet he told Samuel, "You need to obey the Lord.
Mhm.
Don't do what I did." Right? When he tells you a message, give it.
Mhm.
Don't. And so you see that little bit of that little instance in there where it's like Eli's giving the little bit of advice he has to Samuel, where he's like, "Do the right thing."
Yeah.
And Saul's not doing that to David.
And note that at least from my memory, there is nothing in God's judgment of Saul for with the Amalekites of his death.
Mm.
His death may not have come so violently by his own hand
Mhm.
if he had followed in the pattern of his son
Yeah.
in
Well-
relation to David.
Absolutely, because you have many kings. There are a few kings of Israel and a few people that pray that "Remember Me" speech, that prayer, where they actually repent, not the Saul's attempt at a few more moments of life, a few more. No, don't take this from me.
Yeah.
And you see God actually reinstill with Manasseh, worst king of Israel. He reinstills the kingdom to him. And so you have it. There could have been something like that where God says, "Okay, but you're going to work with David. He's going to be king. Like the kingdom's still not yours.
Yeah.
But like it's not going to but it doesn't have to be bad."
It doesn't have to be as bad as it can be.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is one of the reasons why I don't understand. Like, I can only see Saul as a tragedy, at least to me.
Yeah.
As a tragic character rather than a villain, you say?
Well, he is a villain,
Yeah.
but it is a tragedy narrative.
I made that connection early on with Saul and David being Cain and Abel. With the one was a farmer, one is a shepherd, one tries to kill the other. And you see the same thing with Cain and Saul, where they're offered, "Hey, don't do this. It's at your door. You
Right.
don't do it." And then he tries to kill them.
Yeah.
And it's he had an opportunity. He has these opportunities to turn around, but he's not.
But David's a small, lanky guy and gets away.
Yes.
Yeah. What is he? Like, because he's apparently big enough to beat a bear.
Well, the Lord gives him over to him
Okay.
in battle. So it might be that he's not physically imposing at all.
Okay. Could be.
Told that he has beautiful eyes.
Yeah. And what was it? Rustic, robust. What was it?
Oh, I don't
Yeah.
remember.
Ruddy.
That's it.
Ruddy look. Saul sent messengers to David's house to watch him, that he might kill him in the morning. But Michal, David's wife, Saul's daughter, told him, "If you do not escape with your life tonight, tomorrow you will be killed." So Michal let David down through the window, and he fled away and escaped. Michal took an image and laid it on the bed and put a pillow of goat's hair at its head and covered it with the clothes. And when Saul sent messengers to take David, she said, "He is sick." Then Saul sent the messengers to see David, saying, "Bring him up to me in the bed, that I may kill him." And when the messengers came in, behold, the image was in the bed with a pillow of goat's hair in its head. Saul said to Michal, "Why have you deceived me thus and let my enemies go, so that he had escaped?" Michal answered Saul, "He said to me, 'Let me go. Why should I kill you?'"
Anyway,
That's
on this,
What kind of goofy henchmen are these that they carried a bed to Saul and didn't notice it wasn't a real person?
it feels like the Three Stooges. Also, big note. What is an image?
It is an idol.
It is a household god.
Now, here's the thing. You would also make an image of kings and place it in a garden so that the people knew who the king looked like.
Sure, yes. This is not the argument that you're making here, though, is it?
Is the image a household god?
What is the likelihood that it's a household god over an image of the king?
If it is an image of the king, there's the political reason to have those.
I don't see the argument there. The connection, like that does exist. You're right. That
Yes.
does. But you're talking a nation that just came out of tribalism.
Yep.
You're talking David, who already is not on good standing with Saul. You're talking a nation that has tons of why can't I think of the word? It's not monotheism. What's it called?
Henotheism.
Henotheism.
Yep.
Where you believe one God, but
Yep.
other gods exist.
Yes.
But you follow one. And that appears to be the standard.
And Israelite kings later on do end up becoming, falling into that idol worship.
Now, I'm not here arguing that David himself
Oh no,
uses
it would be
the image.
It would be totally of the line. However, the thing I think is funny is that it's Saul's daughter puts the image there, and it would be funny if it was her dad's face that she put the goat hair on, so that when he turned it over, he's like, "Hey,
Hold on, I recognize this man.
yeah,
I think that this supports the idea that henotheism is widely practiced in ancient Israel. David himself appears to only devote himself to Israel's God.
yes,
And I think that can be that is seen all throughout the Psalms. There's the I call out to you only to you I serve, all that
Yeah.
kind of stuff. And yet, if he's allowing, so it seems, if we're going to bring, I think, the least amount of explanation to the text, rather than trying to read in, there are household gods in his house, either his servants, his slaves,
Because-
or Michael herself
yep.
has them. He's okay with having icons around.
Yes. And you also have, okay, so there's a few ways we can go with this. It's either the face of the king, which is whatever, we can put that there. But the other one is, like you're saying, the images of foreign gods, which many of the mercenaries of kings, like you'll see later with David, are not from that land. Usually your mercenaries, your closest bodyguards, were paid people that were separated from not the people that you were king over. Like David's mighty men, a lot of them were from outside of Israel.
Yep.
And so it could be theirs because he has people from outside the kingdom.
And I think that would explain Michael's disrespect to the object.
Yes. And on the other hand, Saul is experiencing a harmful spirit. He is not obeying God. And Israelite kings later on fall into major idol worship repeatedly.
Yeah.
And so,
And it's commonplace all throughout Judges.
yes. And so it could be that now that he has been rejected by God, he has gone elsewhere.
Yeah. Regardless, David has icons in his house.
Saul has icons in his house.
David has icons in his house.
Like,
This is David's bed, so unless you
yes, but he's in the house of Saul.
Yes, I think metaphorically. I don't think that he's in the generic palace, because there's the whole Saul sent messengers to David's house to watch him.
Okay.
Verse 11.
Yep.
They're watching him.
Yes.
If they were to leave, if a group of people were
Yes.
to leave, they would watch. The implication,
Yes.
at least what's implied, is nothing goes in and out of the house as far as the watchers can tell.
Yes.
David may sneak out, sure. But she doesn't go out, get an idol, come back, put it in. The implication is that she grabs what's there so that
Yes.
David can sneak out. And so David has icons in his house.
It is interesting that he uses image and not idol, though.
Well, again, we could look that up. Do you mind looking it up?
one of mine uses idol.
Yeah. It is idol.
Yeah.
I think household god makes the most sense. I think that likely one of his servants
Mm-hmm.
who, and henotheism is widely popular
Yep.
at the time. I think David, it shows throughout Psalms his perhaps straight up monotheism, if not radical henotheism, verging on monotheism,
Yep.
if not just straight up monotheism. And Michael's disrespect for the idol, I think, indicates her, let's say, either half-hearted use of it, or it was one of their servants or something.
I might be on Josh's side on this one.
Really? You think
Yeah.
it's a king's
Well,
image?
It seems like there would be less problems with that being around the house. An image of the king.
I think the likelihood of that is too low.
Okay.
To me, it's just a likelihood thing. Like it seems like
This is the first I've come across the issue. And like you said, you're reading ESV now? It must be an older version because I have the 2011 version and they use idol. Like so they changed it.
Yeah. I think, at least for me, the clearer understanding, despite the fact that it's more difficult theologically, would be an idol.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do we have any commentary view on it?
I can grab one.
The commentary I've read on it is that it is disputed. But I haven't read any in-depth like
That is what the NIV application Bible would say, because I think that that's fair. Okay.
Yeah.
I think we've represented the
Two sides.
two sides here.
Yeah. Well, three sides, because it could be of David's own possessions,
Yeah.
which is the least likely.
I think the testimony from Psalms is way too, I would argue, verging on monotheism, if not monotheistic itself, or radical.
I would say it's monotheist.
Yeah, or radical, extremely radical henotheism.
Yeah. And then the least theologically concerning, the least theologically problematic.
But the most historically
Let's say improbable
is a good word.
would be the king's image.
Interesting. I don't get why it would be improbable.
I don't think you see that widespread in that area.
Potentially.
That happens in Greece, Rome, even less so in Egypt.
In Babylon.
At what time in Babylon?
That's the whole the origin of the idea. So in Genesis 2, which is the polemic of the Babylonian creation story, that's why God makes man in their image in the garden, is because it was in the Babylonian gardens they would put the king's image to represent him.
Right. But that would be crazy expensive, not often in households, as far as I'm aware. Regardless, now we're also debating over things that are not our fields of expertise.
Yeah.
Anyway, as the NIV application commentary goes, it is disputed.
Yes. Which is a good place to land. And now we end chapter 19. Now David fled and escaped, and he came to Samuel at Ramah and told him all that Saul had done to him. And he and Samuel went and lived at Noioth. And it was told Saul, behold, David is at Noioth in Ramah. Then Saul sent messengers to David to take David. And when they saw the company of the prophets prophesying and Samuel standing as head over them, the Spirit of God came upon the messengers of Saul, and they also prophesied. Then it was told Saul he sent other messengers, and they also prophesied. And Saul sent messengers again and a third time, and they also prophesied. Then by himself went to Ramah and came to the great well that is at Seku. And he said, where are Samuel and David? And one said, behold, they are at Noioth in Ramah. And he went there to Naioth in Ramah, and the Spirit of God came upon him also. And as he went to prophesied until he came to Naioth in Ramah, and he too stripped off his clothes, and he too prophesied before Samuel, and lay naked all that day and all that night. Thus it is said, is Saul also among the prophets?
Couple points of note.
Yeah. So it's
This
like,
is
hey, all of his servants started prophesying, and then he also went and took off all his clothes and started prophesying. It's like, wait, they took off their clothes? It's a little bit subverting expectations.
It's also a wild twist to the progression that we've been getting from Saul's life.
Well, it also, we have the first real mentioning of like, hey, Samuel is head over this group of prophets. We have prophets here and there, right? They go around prophesying, and people will frame that in different ways. It appears to be an ecstatic form of speech that is like, kind of euphoric in a way. But yeah, that's interesting.
Specifically related to the Spirit coming upon him like it did when he became king.
Yeah.
And why is it happening again?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's really up in the air. It does seem like they're attributing the reason that he did this to Samuel, though.
I think it could be a bit of where the presence of God, the Spirit of God, is active. Human will melts away.
Mm.
Yes.
And he's still the Lord's anointed, which is...
He's the Lord's anointed. The kingship has been taken from him. It's also, he's also out of his realm of control. He's where Samuel is.
He's naked, if you will.
Yes, but he's not in the king's court. He's not in like a military installation. He's in the prophet school at Naioth. And so it's he's stepping outside of his authority structure. And so there's an interesting thing there.
Yeah.
And I wonder if this is also like another nod from God saying like, hey, it doesn't have to be bad.
Sure.
You know, look, at any time the Spirit could come upon you. And it doesn't have to be like it is right now.
Right. Could be.
At any time this can turn around.
Could be.
And it's also a note that it's not your success or Dave, what you or David are doing. It's what I'm doing. That it's because he doesn't do anything, the Spirit just comes upon him. And he prophesies. It's not that he was successful, that he won battles, that he did this great thing.
No, he's actively doing
nothing.
Well, he's actively doing something wrong.
Yeah.
He's chasing after, and he asks for, where is Samuel and David? Like he's ready to fight Samuel for David.
Yeah. It's also interesting that, like, of course, this comes before Jesus, but this has the same pattern as two of his parables of a rich man sends servants to another land. Where's my son? Or
the vineyard?
There's the vineyard, and there's the one where the king sends his son and they kill him, and then they send the messengers. They send the messengers, and then they kill the son. And then
I don't.
He comes, but it's an interesting inversion. It's not negative. It's not positive. It's negative. I'm sending these guys to get David. There's an interesting thing there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, to summarize kind of what we've talked about, because we're at the end here, and it seems it's funny. I know it's just funny that he strips naked and starts prophesying, but we also began the last chapter with Jonathan giving up his robes.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
to giving up like his position, his his what is it?
And he's day
His
and night.
attire.
Like
Yeah.
exposure.
And to me, it feels a little bit like this is God putting Saul back where he's supposed to be so that the rest of the story can play out. right? Like they feel like bookends a little bit because we have that. I'm
Like
not going to say
father,
it's a
like son.
chiasm, yeah, but
It's not a chiasm, but but
The beginning and the end are very reminiscent of each
the
other.
beginning and end are very reminiscent. They're bookends.
and it's I'm putting arbitrary beginning and ends because they're not like the beginning and ending of different stories or anything
The
like
bag of foreskins is the main point,
that. The
right?
main point is the center of the chiasm is the bag of foreskins.
I'll find a chiasm to make it.
For sure, that's going to make it into the intro.
Yeah, it's man, there's something just weird about this passage where like the king goes to this place and there's just this guy with all his students and they're all prophesying like
In the dojo.
yeah,
sorry.
or like and they're away from everything. It's a bit weird.
Yeah.
It's got a bit of like a
Mystical aspect to it.
it's like yeah. It's a bit out of this world.
Yeah.
Like in a like I'm saying this as somebody who's witnessed a few miracles. Right? So like it's just weird. Imagine walking into the forest and just coming across this prophet with 40 men just speaking ecstatically and you're
Naked.
like and then all of a sudden you start doing it.
Yeah.
And then you're just like, what is happening? Like where did this come from?
I like to think that
And it's not like
David's not listed among the prophets here.
no.
So is he just standing there going, cool?
Yeah.
Well, no, and that's what's interesting because he's like, where's Samuel and David? Samuel's there, but David's not.
Well, I mean, he's around. It's implied. So I like to think that he's just off to the side, just, oh, okay,
Just
cool.
hanging out.
He just watches Saul walk up. Where is he? Ah!
What are you going to do about it? Well, I mean, that's another thing you say that seems kind of odd. That whole world seems odd to me. The fact there are idols just laying around.
Mhm.
Like for us, if there's something that's like laying around from the time of the judges, so we'll say 40, 50 years ago, it's like a Model T or whatever, right? It's something real old. And we're like, wow, that's a part of history. For them, it was like these ancient gods we think about now and idols to them. Those were like household items that would have been created within the last 100 years.
Yes, that is only a North American thing. Europeans are very different. They have old stuff.
Fair enough. What I'm saying is that the ancient things that we're
Yeah.
talking about, like idols, like the palace,
We're
like,
everyday things like my Lego
like the
on the
Don't
side.
bring up your Lego flowers again, okay?
Why? They're so beautiful.
I know, but
And I
this
don't
is
have
an
to water them.
audio-only podcast.
Yeah, that's why I said my Lego plant.
You know what? When we get cameras, the first thing, we're not even going to have us on camera. We're just going to have the flowers.
Guys, the Lego orchid is beautiful.
I might send Stuart a photo just so he can put this up on the YouTube. On the YouTube. Man, I'm showing my age. No.
On the YouTube.
Guys, I just picked I could have said a book.
Guys, let me finish my thing about historical, chronological snobbery. That's what it is.
You're right. Joel, continue.
I just think it's cool that this ancient world we're reading about has a much farther back history than what we have right now. They know more about what has happened in recent history than we know now because we are only reading accounts from it from Samuel and maybe Chronicles.
That's true. But we know about more now than they know about now.
That's true. Now, and here's the thing:
That
we
is how
can't get
time
too
works.
cocky because the future knows more than we do now.
About
This is
the
getting
future.
dumb. What I'm saying is they lived in a fundamentally different world where you had prophet schools out in the woods where you
Yeah.
could go kill 200 people for their foreskins. These things are weird, and we need to
Your-
acknowledge
Your,
this.
Yes.
your father-in-law was throwing spears at you.
Yeah, you maybe had an idol of either a god or your king that you
Your
hid in your
father-in-law.
bed in some kind of weird, like, slapstick humor.
Here's the thing. We treat that like that's all ancient, and it is, and it's
Yeah.
like totally different. pick up some like weird history stuff from the Dark Ages, things get real weird too.
Yeah, no.
It is funny how rationalistic we are in the society, and also it's like we do some crazy stuff in our society.
Yeah,
I can't say
and
that.
David would be thinking this right now is absolutely crazy.
Yeah,
These guys are talking into these little tiny metal things, and then thousands of people will hear it, potentially, maybe.
this is becoming really meta.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna have a crisis really quick. It's probably fine, though.
Historical perspective crisis.
We good to wrap up?
I think so.
Thank you so much for listening to the Second Rate Saints podcast. We've enjoyed going through this Samuel series. We're really getting like a kind of a feel for what a journey through a longer book. We've done a couple of short book reviews. Some of my favorites are like Nahum and Jonah.
Galatians was fun.
Galatians was really good. We've done those short ones. We've done the one-offs. It's been really interesting to see how it's played out through 1 Samuel, and I've really enjoyed the audience interaction we've gotten through these episodes. People just interjecting with their own thoughts and ideas as we go through the passage. There's a good chance you thought of a lot of things today that we are not going to talk about because there's no way we could have even thought of them. So if you've got any thoughts, questions, or concerns, please hit us up at secondratesaints@gmail.com. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, or even use the chat feature on our website at secondratesaints.com. We look forward to hearing from all of you guys again, and we'll see you next week. Just end it.
Whoa.